Hey, my name is Mohammed Darab, and in this video I'm going to walk you through deploying a multi-node big data cluster. It's going to consist of 3 nodes, a master node, and 2 worker nodes. So as you see here, I have my blog post that I've done. This was back in January, towards the end of January, how to deploy a big data cluster to a multi-node Kubernetes cluster. That's what we're going to follow. I'm going to do step by step, and on the right hand side over here you'll see 3 different SSH windows. I'm into the master. You see the worker 1 and worker 2. So we're going to be deploying it step by step straight from my blog. Again, the URL for this blog post will be in the video description below. So let's get started. Scroll down. First, the assumptions. So if you're new to big data clusters and you don't know much about in terms of what specs your nodes have to be in the minimum requirements and all that stuff, head on over, check out all the other videos that I've done on that topic. But very quickly, I have 3 different VMs set up. Each one has 8 CPUs, 64 gigabytes of RAM, and 250 gigabytes of hard disk. That's all 3 of my nodes. They have also running Ubuntu 18.04 Server Edition, and OpenSSH is installed on each one of them, as well as they have static IP addresses and all that stuff I've noted right here. So once you have all that set up, let's go ahead and the first process is we have to do a kind of a base preparation of all the nodes. So these commands will have to be run on each one of the nodes. So there we go. And let me go ahead and kick that off. We'll start with that. Okay. There we go. And then worker 2. There we go. So now we're going to disable swapping. And we'll go back to the master and one thing I want to note is if you want to research more into a specific thing, a specific topic, I have some notes in here with links to go further research that. If not, I highly advise to go and look things up. Otherwise, you won't understand what the heck is going on. So I'm going to run this on the master. Cool. Worker 1. Cool. And worker 2. Okay. Now we're going to configure Docker and Kubernetes prereqs on each one of these nodes. That'll run. So we let that run. This might take some time. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and resume once it's all done. So that finished up on master, on worker 1, and worker 2. So we will continue to step 4 and run this. Now we're off to configuring the Kubernetes master. Whatever node will act as the master. In this case, I named it master, so we're going to do everything to that. So let's switch over to that. One thing I do want to say is there are tools and utilities you can download that'll make this scripting a lot easier instead of having to cut and paste it. And I mean, imagine if you have 50 or 100 nodes, right? You're not going to do this on every single one. So there are tools to do that. This is a breakdown, and since we're just doing a home lab, multi-node, 3 nodes, you should be familiar with the different processes before jumping into trying to figure out how to script everything. It's good to know the basics and the fundamentals before you learn to script things. So let's go ahead and head on over to the master, and that's where we are at. Let's actually hit clear, bring it back up to the top, and then we will create this RBAC YAML file And again, there's a link here if you want to learn about RBAC authorization in Kubernetes, what it is, what's the point of it, all that. Definitely check out that link right there. Number 2 is, going to run that on the master. So that'll go ahead and kick off the Kubernetes cluster, creating the master node. This is going to take some time. I'll go ahead and pause the video and resume once it is complete. That finished, and if you pay, look down here at the bottom, you'll see the last 2 lines right here. Let me highlight that for you. The Kubeadm joined, and the IP address, token, and then a hash. That is what you'll need to add the other nodes in. You just run that command on the other nodes, and then it'll automatically join the master. So if you look at the blog post, let's get back to the blog post here. So we ran that, and then we note the kubeadm join command, which is just 2 lines down here. Now, for some reason, if you close out the window or something and you forgot that, or you don't know what that command is, you can run the kubeadm token create print join command right here, and it'll print out. It'll be a new one. It'll be a different hash, but it'll print out the same thing, and you can still connect different nodes of the Kubernetes to the master. So now we're going to set up a couple more things here. Let's copy that in, and then there. Continue to step 5. Okay. And now, if I do let me go ahead and bring this back up. If I do a kubectl git nodes, you'll see that the master, that's the name of the node, it's ready, and it's been up for 114 seconds, so we're good to go. And also tells you the version of Kubernetes, which is 1.17. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the worker nodes, and we're going to run that join command on them. So let's go ahead and let's go scroll up here and get that join command. Where did that join command go? Up here we go. We're going to get that, and then we will go to the worker. Let's go to configure the worker, step number 1. We will run that here, run it. Oh, by the way, this has to be run in sudo, so run that, and then sudo run that. So these will run through a couple checks and then start to add them to the Kubernetes cluster, to the master. And now what we're going to do is, if we come down here and type in the same git nodes, in a few seconds you'll see worker 1 and worker 2 show up here when you run this command. So you see worker 1 joined. It's not, the status is not ready, so it still has to run through a couple checks before it actually has a status already, but it has joined. Now let's see this. Now worker 1 and 2. So in a couple seconds here, it's already joined, so you see it's already done, but still has to run through a couple things before it actually shows as ready. And usually I find it takes about 30-40 seconds. So, and instead of just hitting up and enter, you can just hit -W, and it'll have a watch. That's a watch command, and or the watch flag. See, now worker 1 is ready. Now once you see worker 2, you can stop it. There we go. So now we just hit Control-C, and now if we go back and do the nodes, they're all ready. So now you have your 3-node Kubernetes cluster. Now we're ready to modify a couple more things before we get and deploy the big data cluster. So we did all this. We ran the join command, right? Now we're on number 2. We're going to go set up the volumes here, running this there, and we'll run this on that, and run it on worker 2. And then we'll go ahead and execute that. First, we have to modify the permissions on that file. And then we will execute using this command. Okay, so this creates folders under this local storage, local-storage, and that's where the BDC will go ahead and deploy all the services, and anything it needs to store, it'll store it in those folder structures right there. Then we go back to the master, and we will go ahead and download this file to it, the local storage provisioner YAML file. And then we will go ahead and do the kubectl apply to that, so actually execute that. Cool. And now we will go ahead and do an update. And run that. And now we'll run this. And now since I'm running Ubuntu 18.04, I'm going to run this command right here, specific to 18.04. That'll go ahead and download AZ data. And now let's go ahead and install everything. Now this will take a couple seconds. I'll go ahead and pause the video and then resume once we're ready to go. Now it's installed. Now what you want to do is, let's hit it clear real quick. Let's do an AZ data version just to make sure we have the right version installed. 15.0.4023. So we're good with that. Now what we're going to do is time to deploy the big data cluster. Now actually we can go ahead and get out of this. We don't need worker 1 or worker 2 anymore. We're done with that. Actually, let me go ahead and exit out of that. And then we can go exit out of this. Cool, so now we just have the master window up, and we will run AZ data BDC create, which is step number 1 right here, deploying the big data cluster. This will initiate the process. We're gonna go ahead and accept. We're gonna hit yes. And I love how this is kind of black, but if you can see, there are 3 different options. If you look over here on the left-hand side under on the blog post, you'll see the 4 options are AKS dev and test, AKS dev test HA, and then 3 is Kubeadm dev test and Kubeadm prod. So we're going to go ahead and do Kubeadm dev test. AKS is if you're deploying a big data cluster on Azure and using AKS to build a Kubernetes cluster. Since we built the cluster, or at least since I built it on my home lab, we're going to be doing Kubeadm or Kubeadm, however you say it. So we're going to press number 3 and hit enter. So for the username, I just do admin, type in a password. Now for the next prompts, the next 2 prompts, we want to make sure we type in local-storage. This is where the persistent volumes for the data and also the log file. And as you can see, let me just take the mouse here. You can see data and also logs. So that's what we're pointing and say, hey, put your data and your log files in those folder structures that we created earlier. So we just hit enter, and this will start the deployment or the cluster deployment process for big data clusters. This will take some time. It'll take 20-30 minutes, maybe shorter, maybe longer. I don't know. It depends. But it takes about roughly 20-30 minutes. I'll go ahead and pause the video, and then I will resume once it is done. So we're almost there, almost at the finish line. So the cluster finished. So you see here it says waiting for cluster controller to start. It went through that a couple times. Then the controller endpoint was available. Then all the data pool, the storage pool, the master compute, all that we're done. So we actually created a big data cluster on a 3-node Kubernetes cluster. Now what do we do next? Let me go ahead and type clear to bring it back up. We're going to do az data login. That's going to prompt us for the namespace, which in this case by default it is the MS SQL-cluster name. And then we're going to put in the username password that we created initially. So now we're logged into AZ data. Now what we want to do is run AZ data BDC endpoint list-o table. And that'll spit out all the endpoints. So you see here we have the gateway, Spark jobs, application proxy management, log, metrics. What we're concerned about in this video is actually connecting via Azure Data Studio and checking things out, making sure everything is fine from that side. So we'll go ahead and highlight that, copy it, and then we will go over to AZ data. And as you see here, I'll go ahead and delete that. Oh, it already connected. So I ran through this before, but just for the sake of doing it again, let me go ahead and delete the connection and X out of that. We go ahead and run connect, and I'll go ahead and clear the list. So we will go ahead and hit SQL Server, dump that in there, and then admin and the password, and then hit connect. So this will bring up, let me actually maximize this right here. There we go. This will bring up your login. Now you're logged into, just like you see in SSMS with a little bit less information, but you get to see your HDFS folder, your databases, security, server objects, everything is here. By default, what comes up is the home screen. So you get a quick view of your databases and size. You can run a query. It gives you some information here in the server dashboard. One thing I wanted to bring to your attention, which I actually noticed this, and I brought this up with Microsoft, is we are running Ubuntu server version 18.04. But if you see here, it says 16.04. So I don't know where this is actually being grabbed from. Maybe something within some scripts or something was still pointing to something old. I don't know where that's coming from, but I've put in the request to see what's going on with that. But we're actually running Ubuntu 18.04. Now we have this Big Data Cluster tab, and this brings up the cluster dashboard. Again, all of the endpoints that we just saw on the SSH, we see right here. Data virtualization, creating tables. What we're going to do is, let's stop that. Let's actually move this over. Let's bring this back up here. So now we have a multi-node Kubernetes cluster. We have a big data cluster running on top of that. We can do a kube ctl git pause and pass it the namespace. These are all the pods and the number of containers running on those pods. Now, if we want to see what pod is running on what node, we just do the same command, but this time I think it's -o wide. There we go. Yep. And you see the node column, worker 1, worker 2, worker 1, worker 2, worker 2. So each one of these pods are in a different, you can see the node that has the pod running on it. So that's kind of neat. So that's all. I mean, this is the blog post, goes with the video. Hopefully this was of some benefit. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll get back to you, or reach out to me and we can get this working up and running. Don't be scared by the complexity of this, especially if you're just new to Kubernetes and containers and all that. I consider myself, maybe not as new as a novice, but I'm learning, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to learn. So I'm here to help you out. What else? Next video, I'm going to be talking about some of the troubleshooting aspects. So if we go back to this and we type in, we look at where was it again? Was it the home? Big data cluster. You have the cluster dashboard. You'll pop that in, and then you see this gives you a visual of the state of your pods. So this will come up shortly. There we we go. See this green check mark here? That means we're good to go. They're all healthy. You can click on, for example, SQL Server. You see SQL Servers on the master, compute, data, storage, right? What else? Big data cluster overview. Now, if we click on this troubleshooting little icon right here, it'll pop up a whole bunch of notebooks. And I've mentioned this in a previous video. We're going to be looking at some of these notebooks and making sure that, oh, connection lost. How did I get connection lost? There we go, come back. We'll go through some of these, troubleshoot, but more importantly, I want to actually look at this. Let's go back to that. Let's actually close out of that, X out of this, and X out of this. I want to look at the Grafana and Kibana. We're going to look a little bit, we're going to bring them up and kind of fumble around there and see visually what is it that these services, these open source free utilities are part of big data clusters to help you monitor logs and metrics and things like that, part of the package. So I'm gonna be doing videos on that in the next round. So yeah, hopefully this was of some benefit, and until the next video, take care. Peace.